Good evening to everybody on the East Coast and good afternoon for everybody on the West Coast. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us today. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Brenda Moynihan. I am the Director of Marketing and Outreach here at the Kensington in White Plains, New York. And tonight we present the Kensington Summer Book Club featuring Dr. James Rouse as our moderator. Tonight's book we will be highlighting, it's called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Please remember to register for the remainder of the book club meetings the first Wednesday of every month until August. And please go to the website www.thekensingtonwhiteplains.com. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to give you some information about the Kensington for those of you that are not familiar with us. Kensington Senior Living, or KSL for short, is an assisted living owner-operator with 7 communities open and operating throughout the country. The KSL promise to love and care for your family as we do our own is core to the belief that no aspect of caregiving is more important than partnership with our residents and their families at every stage of aging. This series is brought to you through the collaboration of several of the Kensington Senior Living communities, including locations in White Plains, New York, plus Redondo Beach and Sierra Madre in California. In all of our communities, we are committed to providing outstanding care every day with the full spectrum of clinical support, including caring for those with Alzheimer's and additional dementias. And folks, I just want to remind everyone, this is a virtual book club. So please be respectful of each other. Please keep your Zooms on mute unless you're ready to jump in with a comment or a thought. And please, again, please let one person talk before someone else comments. And I'm so excited now for those of you that don't know Dr. James Rouse. I'd like to give you some information about him. Dr. James, as he likes to be called, is a high-performance lifestyle leader and functional nutrition expert, motivational speaker, nationally renowned naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, athlete, and award-winning author of over a dozen books. Dr. James combines his knowledge of natural medicine, transformational psychology, yoga, and therapeutic cooking to inspire people to improve the quality of their lives and to provide them with the tools they need to make positive, healthy changes. So please join me in welcoming Dr. James as our MC for tonight's book club.
Thanks, Brenda. Hey, everybody, how are you? Everybody wave. I know that one of my favorite quotes from Brene is, "Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen." So I think that's a perfect opening for tonight, that we get a chance to give ourselves permission to be seen. So thanks everyone for being here tonight. I see, oh my gosh, look at all these people. This is fantastic. Thank you. You know, my experience with Brene goes back almost 20 years. I got a chance to meet her, got a chance to work with her almost 8 years ago. And she's a force of nature. And if anyone's ever read her books, seen her do presentations, she's amazing. She's one of the kinds of people that when you're around her, she puts your guard down naturally. She helps you to put your guard down. She's a permission giver, just the way that she shows up for life, her storytelling, her research, her science. And as a scientist myself, the thing that I found most awesome about her work is that she helps kind of bring us into research with your heart. And I think anyone who's navigating the planet today, has anyone read the book? Let me just open up with that. Has anyone read the book? Brenda has. I'm going to go scroll across here. And you have? Awesome. Who else? Anybody else? Well, I think we've got several. Hi, Linda. Good to see you. I think what's beautiful about this book, and I'm going to open up with a quote. And if you have read this book, or if you know anything about Brene's work, I think you're going to go, oh my goodness, this quote captures where we are today, where we are as a country, possibly where we are as a world. And this is all about something that I think you're going to love. This is actually from a quote that was by Teddy Roosevelt in a speech that he did 110 years ago when he was in Paris speaking at the Sorbonne. And it was all about something called the citizenship of the Republic. And just a quick kind of word on what Teddy was speaking to and why this book is so important today. Teddy was being asked, what is it that makes a country, a culture, a family, what is it that makes it work? How does it really work to be a benefit for everyone, where it lifts everyone? And I think all of us today go, oh my goodness, the US right now needs some lifting. We as a culture need to find ways to see each other again and not be demonizing and dehumanizing. How do we actually open our hearts to see one another? So I'm going to read what Teddy said 110 years ago, and I think this is a perfect way, because this was actually the catalyst for this book and a big catalyst for Brené doing this work on courage. And this is again from Teddy's speech. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short over and over again, the one who fails. Because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the good deeds, who knows great enthusiasm and great devotions, who spends their selves doing and being a part of a worthy cause? Who at less and best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if they fail having dared greatly. They failed having dared greatly. Anyone here had a public failure in the last day or week or yes? I think that this book speaks to the beautiful nature of vulnerability. And I want to read something that Brené said about this book and why she wrote it. The big idea is that research on empathy. Every human being is hardwired for empathy. We actually need connection. What gives us purpose and meaning in our lives without connection is what happens is we suffer. Being intentional with and for connection is the most important work of being human today, our willingness to be seen. So I want to open up that idea as we begin, because this whole idea of vulnerability has been something that's been deconstructed by all kinds of researchers. And I think for anyone here tonight, we've all been in places where we've been vulnerable, where we've been seen. And some of the most beautiful things that's come out of this is at one time, I think vulnerability, I know when I was a little boy, vulnerability meant weakness. Vulnerability meant that you were going to be open to being wounded because you're going to be seen for not being perfect. And what Brené's work is teaching us now, this last 12, 14 years since she's really begun this research in earnest, is that being seen and being vulnerable is actually one of the most powerful things that we can do physiologically, neurochemically. It actually benefits our immune system. It actually helps with neurogenesis, meaning it actually helps to build new brain pathways. And interesting enough, it's like the ultimate permission marketing to help other human beings to become more humane and help them to develop a part of themselves that they're holding back. This is contagious. This literally helps people to wake up that innate nature that's in every human being to want to be a better human being. So I'd love for us right now to maybe, if anyone can throw out an antidote and say, yeah, you know, in my life, and I can share an antidote right out of the gate, I'm the first person in my family to be a non-drinker. So I'm the first non-alcoholic in 5 generations of my family. And I remember when I told my family, I made a big announcement. I was like, hey, everybody, I'm not going to drink. I was 20 years old. Gosh, I mean, I think about that. It makes me emotional 37 years ago because I saw the train wreck that was alcoholism in my family. I saw the pain in my family. So when I made this announcement, I was quickly reminded that that's not what we do in this family. We're drinkers. That's how we have fun. That's actually how we do our family. And I was told I wouldn't be fun anymore. And frankly, please don't show up for holidays unless you're going to be drinking. And that was the first time I think I really understood the depth of shame and toxicity associated with that. And I remember the learning lesson. That was one of the biggest reasons it drove me to start to want to study. I did my graduate work in humanistic and transpersonal psychology, which is about healing at a deep soul level. How do we claim our power again? And not power in our ego way, power more in a spiritual way, when we know who we are, but the environment in itself doesn't necessarily give us permission to be seen and feel comfortable or safe in being seen. So anyone here, and you don't have to unmute yourself, you can ask questions here, maybe make a comment. And maybe I'd love to what this book club is all about. I like to say we're spending 30 minutes once a month to learn some really powerful understandings about human nature, to learn about human potential, but also to have a soulful experience of actually being seen and feeling like we can be whole together. Because I do believe, as I kind of scroll through the names here, Pat, Linda, Rebecca, Diana, Gemma, Anne, this is a time, and I think we can do once a month to kind of read good books, but more importantly go, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I actually am part of something that is giving me permission to feel. Because what Brenna said, which I think is one of the most beautiful quotes from this entire book, because true belonging only happens when we are present to our authentic, beautifully imperfect self. Being authentic and being seen by the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. Our level of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. That is beautiful because what we know about vulnerability, and these are some of the areas about vulnerability in today's society. What we know about our immune systems, what we know about aging, what we know about just general emotional resilience and happiness and feeling whole, it goes back to some of the work that was done by Abraham Maslow decades ago. And he was very much a proponent of how do we actually help people to move through the experience of feeling whole and becoming whole. And he talked about this as the language of people who are working on their wholeness, never feeling like we're enough, never rich enough, never tall enough, never smart enough, never having the right address, not driving the right car. And he said that what we understand about wholeness is that it's an ongoing discovery of openness and courage in which you reach higher and higher levels of integration and harmony within yourself and with the outside world, allowing yourself one of the greatest experiences of life, the freedom to become who you truly want to become. The freedom to become who you truly want to become, which in essence, I believe is who we already are. We learn a lot of stories and narratives according to Brenna. And what Brene said is that part of what vulnerability gives us is the permission to be seen, yes, but also the permission to understand the difference between fitting in and belonging. I think many of us have the experience of, oh my gosh, I got to try to fit in. It's a certain group, it's a certain clique, it's a certain neighborhood, it's a certain whatever it might be. And we give up a lot of our authenticity to try to find our way into that group so we can fit in. And what Brene says is that one of the most powerful things is making the distinction between fitting in and actually belonging. Has anyone here over their lifetime, maybe as a child, maybe here in their life today, go, oh my goodness, I've learned a lot about the fitting in experience and feeling like my soul was my light was dimming. The more I try to fit in, the more I felt my light begin to fade. Versus the whole idea of actually belonging. Giant distinction how our brain and our bodies, but most importantly, our hearts respond to the experience of belonging versus fitting in. Anyone would like to comment on that? Anyone feeling like, oh my gosh, isn't that something today where we have so much of the us And then we have the them. Politically, we have it in all kinds of different ways. And I do believe this idea of belonging is one of the greatest experiences where we've learned is that when we move into a space of vulnerability through being open to searching for belonging, which begins with the acceptance of ourselves, we know it's correlated with success. It's correlated with longevity. In fact, we know that epigenetically speaking, which is basically how our genes express themselves, our genes literally feel belonging. And when they feel a sense of belonging, our telomeres, which are responsible for extending our life expectancy, protecting our brains from aging, helping us immunologically, building a bigger immune system, improving heart health and our memory, it actually experiences all those things under the influence of true community when we feel a sense of belonging. If we are in a place of fitting in, or if we will trading ourselves away to fit in, we actually see telomeres shrink. We actually shorten the way that our lives will be expected to be lived and how long we'll live, and our immune system starts to falter in the process. But when we actually go through this idea of vulnerability, we see ourselves being more innovative, we see more emotional resilience, we actually experience greater mental health. In fact, serotonin levels and dopamine levels literally are built in our brain when we do this, which to me, when I think about that, serotonin associated with positivity and resilience, it's also associated with compassion. And Brene said, in the experience of this, if we absolutely can share our authentic selves and our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame cannot survive. Shame cannot survive. When we share our authentic selves and our story with someone who responds with empathy and compassion, it literally dissolves through the experience of compassion. So shame literally goes away. And I want to kind of put forth an idea, because what we're going to be doing all summer long is finding books that help us to not just hopefully transform our own lives, but find peace within ourselves, is absolutely be permission givers for others. When you look at that idea about when we can actually be present for someone who is feeling safe to be seen, in that experience of an environment where compassion is alive, shame literally goes away. And in that experience, there's an exchange between two human beings, which, yes, physiologically and neurochemically makes us better, but I think it begins the healing process for every being. And I wrote this at the end when I wrote this book about this idea of vulnerability. Showing up is permission to give love. Showing up is permission to give love. And when we numb the dark, we actually numb our light. And even though we have just, 4 dozen people here tonight, I think the goal is, how do we give ourselves permission to be seen? And how can we create an experience of belonging that allows others to feel like, oh my goodness, this is the experience of what I learned about this whole idea of how shame can't survive in an environment of compassion, how the idea of actually numbing myself to my dark spots and can dim and even kind of filter my own light. So Brenda, is there a way that we can actually bring in a couple of comments at this point? Because, here is it. Let me see here. And guys, this is my first time doing a meeting this way. So I need all your compassion for the fact that I'm navigating somewhat under the influence of, okay, this is good. So how do I find comments, Brenda?
Dr. James, I have a question. I had read something about the likability trap. And from what I could gather from that, that is someone stuck in between fitting in and belonging. I want to be liked. Everyone wants to be liked. And what is that likability trap? Like if you could speak to that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing is that this likability trap is now something that Brene has been studying. And it really fits in this idea of how do I find a place where I can find my tribe? And sometimes finding our tribe gets lost in the idea of just feeling like a place that we can fit into someone else's experience versus the experience that we long for. And a lot of that is shaped early on in our childhoods, but also today with social media, one of the things that we've learned through, we say that social comparison is the thief of joy. And this idea of needing to fit in is a lot about us trading our peace of mind in order to be liked by someone else. And because social media is a very much a black and white experience in the way that the algorithm is built, we know that science tells us that we will give ourselves away to be liked, but in that compromise our own joy to actually feel the peace of mind that we are truly showing up as our authentic selves. And this is a training experience that happens early in childhood, but social media is now being seen to be one of the greater directors of reinforcing that, to actually feel like likes or views or whatever the case may be, is there a way of creating our social capital today?
Actually, we're all caught up and we know people, and certainly a certain generation that are so caught up in the social media. Where do you see that going? I mean, really, I wonder, if there'll be talk shows in 10 years about this social media conundrum.
Yeah, I think what we have to understand is that social media is super smart. I think everyone should watch Social Dilemma. It's an incredibly sobering documentary about how social media works, but it's also powerful, right? Because we can do things like tonight where we can talk openly about vulnerability. We can talk about shame. We can talk about healing. And we can talk about how, yes, the brain is changing due to social media, but also reinforces the fact that when we are doing other things that digitally do make a giant difference. When I looked at a study that said that an hour on Facebook and the idea of just scrolling is one of the more subtle yet powerful forms of creating social anxiety. Just scrolling versus getting a chance to actually stop someplace and truly connect. And I think one of the things that we know from the science today is that we get an opportunity to do things like this. Eye contact has been shown to be one of the greatest ways that we can actually lower the stress hormones associated with social media and actually augment levels of dopamine and serotonin, but even more importantly, oxytocin. Oxytocin is released with eye contact. And so when we are looking for a way to kind of navigate around social media and say, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling like I need connection, that's an opportunity to do things like we are tonight, but more importantly, certainly with loved ones, family members, actually making a point to do FaceTimes versus phone calls, doing FaceTimes versus text. Studies show that as little as 1.5 minutes of FaceTime can literally raise our oxytocin levels and actually do a lot of the canceling out of some of the more challenging hormones associated that happen alongside of social media.
Hey, Dr. James. So you put up this photo, which makes me smile. And folks, there is a chat box on your Zoom. If you don't want to unmute yourself to talk and you feel more comfortable typing some information in the chat box, I'll gladly read your comments. So it's really up to you.
And while we're waiting for someone to come in, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage are not always comfortable, but they are never a weakness. Vulnerability sounds like truth and it feels like courage. Truth and courage are not always comfortable, but they are never, ever a weakness. That is pure gold, isn't it? And I think that's probably what Brené has been saying in all of the work she's done over the last 2 decades. Part of being human today is asking your heart what makes it come alive, what makes your soul feel open to be seen, and then dedicating your work to becoming more whole. As Abraham Maslow said, this whole idea of wholeness is so important because in wholeness, You actually build your opportunity to feel more intimacy. You increase your self-worth. You raise your self-esteem. You lower stress hormones. You increase your life expectancy. And wholeness is interesting because we absolutely get in the way of wholeness when we start protecting ourselves from being seen. And I think for my experience, when I told you about my family of origin, when it came to addiction and it came to alcoholism, when I decided the preview of coming attractions in my family, which was depression, suicide, other kinds of addiction, when I saw that and I said, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm gonna have to dig in really deep inside of myself and really, really outlove what I'm seeing there. And 37 years later, I'm telling you tonight that as someone who's worked in hospice, as someone who's worked with a lot of, the end of life stories, the end of life narrative, the people that I've seen sweetness in their last breath are probably the people who have really mastered, or at least moving towards mastery of vulnerability. Mastery and vulnerability is simply they sometime in their life decided that their self-love was going to be more important than their social credit. It was going to be more important and more powerful to them to absolutely have the peace of self-love. My grandmother used to say, pursue being truthful, pursue being the true versus being good. Be true versus being good. I think my grandmother kind of had an idea what Brene was studying years after my grandma passed away, is that peace of mind, physiologically, neurochemically, and more importantly, in anything spiritually, happens through understanding what makes us come alive, going for the belonging experience, finding your tribe, allowing yourself to be seen. And yes, it feels good. And yes, it makes all kinds of differences for our health, our mental health, our emotional well-being. But ultimately, I do believe this gives us the opportunity to be a permission giver for others. I think when Gandhi said, there's more to life than increasing its speed, that to me may be one of the most beautiful opportunities. Social media has created a speed in life that we don't see each other anymore the way we used to. But more than that, we don't see ourselves the way we used to. We live in fractals, we live in sound bites, we don't see each other. And I think one of the most beautiful things about Brené's work and Daring Greatly is that she uses very good science, powerful research, but I think she speaks in stories. And if you look at every great culture has great stories about overcoming. And I think tonight, if there's anything I want to encourage everyone to do, is maybe kind of do an inventory of how well you feel that you're being seen. And maybe not necessarily only by other people, but I think what's so powerful is like, how well am I seeing myself? And how is that outpicturing in my life? Because how I see myself is typically how others will see me too. If I'm the kind of person who is an outlier when it comes to being a belonging person versus someone who is seeking to fit in, then maybe that's giving permission to others. We do know that something called emotional contagion is most powerful when people are being vulnerable, honest, truthful, when they're being seen. And if there's anything that I think Brenda, Susan, Kensington, all of us here tonight, I really want to remind everyone here, every single one of you is a healer. And please don't take that in a way that, oh my goodness, that sounds kind of new agey, far out, whatever. You are a healer because according to this research, and I think everyone here has been a witness to this, when you're living your life well, when you're living your life with integrity and character, the way Teddy Roosevelt spoke to in that speech at the Sorbonne 110 years ago, he didn't talk about how we only show the part of us when we're going to be successful. He said the part of us that moves most people is the one who's willing to be in the ring. And if we're going to fail, we fail valiantly because we actually dare greatly. Emotional contagion is literally permission giving that happens between human beings. When we see someone living beautifully, when we see acts of kindness, when we see acts of compassion, that is a contagious form of social activism. So Susan, to answer your question, probably bringing us full circle, how do we counterbalance the hate that's going on in this country that's been normalized? How do we actually overcome the us versus them, the dehumanizing, the demonizing? We start with ourselves by seeing the spots in ourselves that need extra love, extra softness, extra compassion. And then we go about every single day promoting this by living it. When you promote it and you live it, it literally becomes a form of contagion for another human being, stranger, a loved one, a partner, a child, a grandchild, anyone in our life who's within the vicinity of us leading our lives this way, literally starts to want to become that way. That's pure science. And it's pure gold to think about that. You are a healer when we begin by healing ourselves. The more compassion, self-acceptance, and love we bring to ourselves, the more others are willing to bring it to themselves. So that to me is that's the essence of daring greatly. It begins with us. And it begins with the 50 some odd people that are here tonight to think about tomorrow morning, if I was to show up more compassionately, more loving, more kind. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go public with this. I'm going to bring this out in the world. Dropping the ego, shining my light, doing it under the influence of this idea that we are alive to the degree that we serve. Begin with yourself and watch the circle expand around you. That's daring greatly.
So, Dr. James, we've got a couple of comments.
Yes.
One comment is just a comment. It's been so challenging to live a wholehearted life during the extended isolation from social engagement. Accepting impermanence and change as a normal course of living and enjoying one's own company has been a game changer for so many people. So very true. So very true.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great comment, right? Because that whole idea of impermanence is such a it's a large idea these days, right? When we see epidemics in loneliness, so much of loneliness is looking outside of ourselves, right? So many people have seen this almost as a monastic experience with the pandemic, an opportunity to look within, an opportunity to ask those deeper questions of ourselves. And one of the most important things we know is that when Harvard did a study on mental health during the pandemic, they equated one of the most important things was presence. Our ability to be present with ourselves was one of the most fortifying, resilient making opportunities that we could bring to ourselves. Being present. And I can tell you guys, when I read this book initially, I was reading it as a scientist, I was reading it as a physician. And then I started thinking about unpacking my family's history with addiction and alcoholism and shame. And then I started thinking about, oh my gosh, there's so much work that I have inside of myself of all the areas in my life story that I've never wanted to tell because I was afraid I wouldn't be enough if someone knew I had these stories. This idea of impermanence is the fact that when you name it, you tame it. When I was initially working, I had a chance to work with the Dalai Lama back, almost 30 years ago. And he used to say, when it comes to impermanence, he said, when you have something dark inside of you that needs love, name it, and then you will tame it. Name it, and then you will tame it. And His Holiness would say that you want to bring love into the spaces that are dark. You want to make that part that seems unlovable. When you name it, you bring it closer to your heart, and then it becomes tame. It's no longer fierce. It's no longer going to hurt you. It becomes part of you because that's the impermanent nature of all things.
So we have another comment. I am a hospice home health travel nurse. I have found my niche in Northern California. It's a place where I feel alive. I feel a boost in energy, eat healthier there, am more active, etc. When I come home to we and share this excitement with friends and acquaintances, reason, isolation, relocation there, a few of those people who try to talk me out of it and give me 100 reasons, 100 reasons why I should stay in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, Wisconsin. The feeling I get when I try it over, explaining my emotions to them is so exhausting. Then I question myself when I know my true feelings.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I don't know who asked that question, but can I even know?
Whoever it was, did you want to say?
I just want to say, whoever you are, number one, that's so brave. That is the very definition of, I believe, what Brene was talking about with fitting in versus belonging. When you know your truth. Howard Thurman, one of my favorite things that anyone's ever said that I just really, really treasure quotes. Howard Thurman said, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think that really speaks directly to what that comment, that beautiful, brave comment is. So many people would love to make themselves more comfortable by us staying the way that they feel they're most comfortable with. But when we have the audacity to question legacy, when we have the audacity to question authority and family and the way things have always been, asking ourselves what makes ourselves come alive is exactly what the world needs right now. Authenticity is used, it's almost become cliche in this world, the authentic self. What is the authentic self any more than just our willingness to live our truth, be our truth, be true versus being good? Going back to family of origin or what people think we should be doing, that's being good and fitting in. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, no. But is it absolutely giving us the life that we actually are being called to lead? When you just said, sister, I'm going to call you sister, that when you're out there in this life, catching fire, stewarding people's end of life narrative, being a witness, healing, is there anything greater than that? I can't think of anything as a hospice person myself on the medical side. I do believe the things I've seen more than anything at the end of life, I've always said that people who have a lot of unfinished business tend to have their claws out, clinging. I've got more to say. I've got forgiveness work to do. I've got things I have to say and do. Oh my goodness, please give me the time to do it. If we've really developed more of that authentic voice, been vulnerable, being true, I see a lot of that clinging go away, and our willingness to absolutely, as I've witnessed many times, the honor of watching someone die sweetly. The whole experience of giving ourselves permission to absolutely let go, to receive the next evolution. So you, in that experience, who are doing that work, I feel you're being called. And I think that the way you describe that is absolutely, that's prayer work in motion. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for being so brave.
And that's Diana Joy. And Joy, I love that last name.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. That was beautiful.
So I have to tell you all a funny story about acceptance, everything that we're talking about here. I do a lot of different presentations, and this is about 3 years ago. I did a very big presentation for about 100 top professionals of a top hospital, local hospital, the CEO, top doctors, VPs. And I tried to be scientific. Again, I wasn't true to myself, the way that I talk. And right before my presentation, someone had told me a story about someone who had misused the term. Instead of saying TBI for traumatic brain injury, they said TBA. I had that in the back of my mind. And again, I was trying to be very scientific, not myself, because this audience was very scientific. And during the entire presentation, I was talking about senior living, and I kept mentioning TBA. And I could see the faces in the audience, and their faces were saying to me, wow, what is TBA? It's a new disease, okay? I made a mistake. I really meant to say TBI. And towards the end, I said, okay, folks, how many of you heard me say TBA? Most of their hands went up, and I started to laugh. I said, well, I got to tell you, I screwed up. I really meant to say TBI. And at that point, I really was true to myself because I became myself. I didn't try to fit into their scientificness, and I was myself. The rest of the presentation went really well. A lot of good facts, but it was very interesting because I could see the change in the audience of now seeing me, not me trying to be them, but me being me. So that's my little story.
That's a beautiful story. So here's something I'm going to ask everyone to take a trust walk with tonight. Again, I mean, I bring tons of notes. I read maybe 3 of them. Here's something I'd love for y'all to do. Everyone Google tonight before bedtime, maybe half an hour before bedtime, Google loving kindness meditation. Loving kindness meditation. And you'll find 10-minute versions, 8-minute versions, 20-minute versions. This to me is the absolute essence of how do we train ourselves to be more open and vulnerable and more open to the idea of being true versus being good. Loving kindness meditation has been around forever and ever. They call it metta, which is a Buddhist word for loving kindness. And basically it's a meditation that guides us into greater self-compassion and self-acceptance. And it's been clinically proven by Stanford to be one of the most powerful things that we can do for 3 things. Improve our mental well-being, our emotional resilience. Number 2, absolutely impact the length of our telomeres, which are protecting our DNA from all kinds of diseases. And number 3, one of the greater forces for emotional contagion. So I have a pretty good feeling everyone here is a lover. Everyone here is all about how can I be the change I want to be, see, and experience in the world. So every single one of us, this is like medicine for your soul. This is how our soul catches fire to tell our heart to be strong. You know, the word courage, obviously, Latin, cur, core, the French, brave, truthful. All the etymology of courage comes from the heart. And when wholeness was spoke about by Abraham Maslow 40 years ago, he said, it's 4 chambers of living, all 4 chambers. The loving kindness meditation has been shown to lower blood pressure, decrease inflammation, but also help us after we're done to literally fortify a willingness to be present in the storm. The world is a storm. Trying to fit in creates the storm. The willingness to make eye contact when it's uncomfortable. All of those things are medicine. And that's how we do our healing work in the world. Eye contact creates oxytocin. But the most important practice you will ever do is the morning you turn your lights on, first thing in the morning, you boot up your toothbrush and you see yourself in the mirror. And my favorite thing is like, oh my gosh, who's the old person who rented my face? Oh my gosh, it's you, James. That's you. And then, you know, I do my self-love work in the mirror because studies do show it changes us, it transforms us, and allows us to put our armor down and then go out in the world and be that. Guard down, open heart, emotionally contagious, a change agent. So that to me could be one of the most cool, awesome, impeccably spiritual things that we can be doing right now. Loving kindness. I work in the mirror, and tomorrow morning, I promise you, and I'll put notes on our Soulful Facebook page, Brenda, because I did a lot of note taking. I've read this book probably 13 times, so I'll put some of those things down there. And if anyone here, Linda, I love what you said. I love the Loving Kindness meditation. James, oh, me, I turned you on to it many years ago. I love that. Thanks, Linda, for the love and the shout out there. I mean,
you did. It's an amazing meditation, and it's the best thing I've done, and I have you to thank for that.
Thank you, Linda. I love you, sister.
Me too. Love you back.
So, Brenda, I think daring greatly, and guys, next month we are going to be doing a book called Untethered Soul. An amazing, absolutely amazing book. I think it's my favorite book ever, outside of A Course in Miracles and a few other books. But Untethered Soul is a book for the times that we're living in. You're going to love it. I'll post it on Facebook tomorrow. It's a quick read. You guys can read it in a weekend. It's very, very fast read. And oh my goodness, it's also one of those kinds of reads that you can do one page before bed. Take that with you to bed. And everyone here probably knows this, that there's good science that says whatever you read before bed, so please don't be reading Facebook or Instagram before bed. Read something beautifully spiritual, because while you're sleeping the next 6 to 8 hours, your brain is developing neuropeptides, which are these little proteins that literally start to kind of fortify these ideas and kind of weave them into your thinking, so they actually kind of become part of you. And this is a book I read a lot before bed. And, you know, guys, I did all of my postdoctorate work. I spent 4 extra years studying integrative psychiatry because I saw so many sad people in the world, and I saw so many people who were struggling. And I thought, I want to learn everything I can about how the brain works. And the more that I actually learned about how the brain works, it was all about how love works. The brain works best under the influence of love. So read one good page tonight before bed, and trust the science that overnight, this workshop called Neuropeptides are going to be building this beautiful experience while you're sleeping. Tomorrow morning, you're going to turn on your bathroom light. You're going to be like a ninja. You're going to be, oh my goodness, look at me. I am ready to outshine the darkness. I am ready to be a force for good. And I am ready to love in such a way that the ego is dropped, the swagger is dropped, and it's just absolutely beautifully contagious. That's what this is really all about.
Dr. James, can you repeat the name of your Facebook?
Yes, it's called Soulful Living. Is that what we call it, Brenda?
Soulful You, S-O-U-L, and capital F, capital U, capital L, Soulful You.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And thanks for asking the question. So I'm profoundly dyslexic. You probably saw the way I read. I read everything backwards. So I'm doing my best to read on the fly. And the beautiful thing with that is that we get a chance to learn alongside of me my own neuropeptide process. But Soulful You, and what I'll do tomorrow morning, I'm going to try to, so I can't see your name here. What is your name?
Maureen.
Maureen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put all kinds of fun stuff from Daring Greatly tomorrow morning. I'll take a picture of Untethered Soul and put that there as well. So you'll see the cover of the book and you'll get all the information there. And hopefully you guys will pick it up, read a page tonight, and you guys can talk all about neuropeptides next month, because I don't want this. Tonight's the night I'm talking most. Next month, we're going to be having interactive conversation, and we're going to talk about all kinds of cool things in relationship to what it means to be doing what Howard Thurman talks so beautifully about. Not asking ourselves what the world needs, asking ourselves what makes us come alive, because the world needs people who have come alive. And I'm a vulnerable guy. I want to tell you, I love you guys for showing up tonight. That was vulnerable of all of you to take a half an hour, 45 minutes. And I want you to know how much I appreciate that. It moves my heart to see people willing to say, you know what? Yeah, I want to connect. I want to belong. I'm not interested in fitting in. So thank you.
Hey, Dr. James, we have Miriam would like to say something.
Who is the author of Untethered Soul?
His last name is Singer, Miriam, and I'll put the title up there tomorrow morning. His last name is Singer, and I don't remember his first name, but It's the only untethered soul out there, Miriam. You are gonna love it. It's so good.
Okay.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Again, if you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud, if you'd like to write it in the chat, I'd be glad to read it. Linda? Linda, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I love your idea of reading something like that before we go to bed. I just think that's so empowering. But what I find, my kids, when they were in high school, would, if they had a test the next day, they would read everything they needed to go before they needed to know before they went to sleep, because they thought that they would remember it better in the morning.
Well, Linda, isn't that so cool? So what they were doing is that whole neuropeptide thing. And, they're wanting to remember so they can, break down a hard math problem or something like that. And now that we're all kind of out of school for the most part, we get a chance to know the neuropeptides to say, oh, I'm going to remember how compassion works. I'm going to remember how love works. I'm going to remember how epigenetics works. And all these things, Linda, now that what your kids were doing is brilliant. And now here we are still being students, and we get an opportunity to apply that same level of research into other things that we're interested in. I
know, I'm excited to try that. Sounds fabulous.
It's super, super cool. And yeah, I'll put someone actually, Anne put up, it's Michael Singer, Miriam. So his first name is Michael. Thanks, Anne. You are awesome. Anne, have you read the book?
She said no.
No. Okay, so Anne, but thank you for sharing that with everyone. Awesome book. And I think I'm really wanting to challenge everyone. Please read the book, or at least, read the Cliff Notes. And then we'll have lots to discuss next month, because that book has been seen. I mean, there's so many people, world leaders, who said that book was the life-changing book for them. Like literally, that's the kind of testimonials it gets. It's the thing that everyone says. I was in this one place and I needed to get to another place. This really spoke to the way I wanted to help myself to emancipate myself from my own self-oppression. And that to me is a beautiful closing for tonight. I've treated thousands of patients in 30 plus years of clinical practice. The biggest thing I've learned, well-being is an art form. I'm a huge fan of broccoli, you guys. I'm a giant fan of almonds, macadamia nuts. I love kale. I think meditation is a game changer. The most powerful thing I've ever seen in medicine is someone who truly loves themselves. Truly loves themselves. Excited about the human they are, excited about the human they're becoming, and not afraid to broadcast that, drop the ego and broadcast it with a level of integrity that's so beautiful that you can't take your eyes off it. Your life wants to be like an epic motion picture. Connection, according to Brené Brown, is really what we all need in life, but we have to be catalysts today because people are shutting down. People only want to show the parts of themselves like the human highlight reel on Facebook or Instagram. I think the more that we are willing to shine that kind of experience of self-love beginning here, oh my goodness. It's the most powerful medicine I've ever witnessed. It's spiritual made physical. Spiritual made physical. Practice it. Love it. I'm 58 years old. I've never felt better because the more that I do this, the more I realize this is what children feel before we take it out of them. Before we take it out of them. Before society unlearns it through them. This is a beautiful time to be alive, everyone. Every one of us wants to be alive more. I believe that. And the world looks for it. Whew.
So folks, I want to thank you all. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Dr. James. I want to thank my colleagues, Susan and Christiane, also for assisting and bringing this wonderful book series to you. Please don't forget to register the next 3 months. On Wednesday, June 2nd, that's our next book club meeting, Wednesday, June 2nd, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Please go to the Kensington website to register, www.thekensingtonwhiteplains.com. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you in a month.
Love and
Thank
blessings,
you.
everyone.